And good morning here on Oneberg. It is time for our weekly broadcast of the Black and Gold Three Rivers podcast. I am your host, Ed Troup, and again, a pleasant good morning to you here across southwestern Pennsylvania. It is February 21st. If you're joining us on Facebook Live or our YouTube channel, we're glad you did here this morning. And this week, we're going to be talking Steeler football in the offseason. And joining me here on the show is our special guest, Mark Kaboly of The Athletic. And Mark, welcome to the big show here today. How are you?
Pretty good, Ed. How you been? Haven't seen you in a while. I think the last time I saw you, you might have been a PA announcer for the Bell Vernon area Leopards. Maybe not that far.
We're going back. That's 10, 15 years ago. For those out there watching, Mark and I are old school guys. We're Bell Vernon guys, both having gone to Bell Vernon. Our ages are a little bit off, though, Mark. I think we're about 10 years apart or something. But, you don't look it. You don't look it, brother.
Well, you're the one that's got some kind of special diet plan going on here. I'm wondering, looking around, where's the rest of you at?
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. A lot of hard work in the last year, as you know, not easy. Hey, Mark, you write for The Athletic, of course, for a good number of years. The Steeler guy over there, our Steeler insider. Mark, let's talk a little bit about the offseason and what's going on with the Black and Gold. When you take a look at last week, we'll start there with some of the moves that were made. 3 cuts. Probably nothing earth-shattering, right? Harvin, the punter, Chooks, and Trubinsky let go last week. They save about $13 million in the salary cap. Any surprises there for you? And are there any more cuts you think coming before we get into the free agency period?
Well, there'll definitely be more cuts coming. There's no doubt about that. They need to clear some more space. They got to add some more money so they can go out and make some more moves by the new league year, which I believe is March 13th. So they still got a couple weeks left. But as for the moves made, I'm a little shocked. Not shocked, but a little surprising that they let go of Harvin at this point right now. I mean, they could have easily just brought him back on his final year and have him actually have a competition and bring somebody else in, but I guess they were done with him. And Chooks, I thought they would at least try to move him some way in via trade. I mean, we're still talking about an offensive lineman who's very young. He's 26, 50-some-odd starts in the league. And if you know anything about the NFL and offensive line play, it's lacking. And people will jump on him somewhere. So you would think they would have been able to get some sort of a return for him, but it didn't end well for him last year. Obviously getting benched for whatever happened midway through the season. So it wasn't shocked that he was gone. It's just I thought they would wait a little bit longer before they would pull the trigger there. And Trubisky, that's another one. You don't normally see these guys get moved or cut this early in the process. They usually wait till they have to. So they were pretty sure that these guys weren't going to be a part of their team, and they didn't care. So move on from there, and now it's try to whittle some more space here in the next couple of weeks so they can make some splash in free agency.
Yeah, the Trubinsky cut, I agree, Mark. I think this was the day after the Super Bowl last week, right? Yeah. Wasn't it Monday or Tuesday of last week?
It was Monday, yeah.
The very next morning after the Super Bowl goes final, they make these 3 moves, and boy, they didn't wait around in the quarterback world of any questions in and around Mitch. I mean, it was pretty much a given that they were going to release him after his performance this past season, right?
Yeah, he struggled. I mean, he was done too. Once he got benched in Indianapolis, it was pretty much done for him. And, unless, they really needed him. I mean, they manipulated his contract last year. People thought it was an extension. It really wasn't an extension. It was just added years onto it, or he was going to get cut. There was no new money to it. It was just covering their butt just in case he was going to be okay. Turns out that he wasn't. So they're moving forward with him. And once again, you don't see many moves this early in the process. I mean, it was announced on the Monday after the Super Bowl, but I'm pretty darn sure that it was just out of respect of the Super Bowl and the Super Bowl week that those moves were made probably a week or 2 weeks in advance of that.
Do you anticipate any other cuts that the Steelers could be making here with their current roster?
Well, Allen Robinson jumps out. I mean, he played okay last year. He didn't be put in a position where to succeed. Then they put him in the slot. Then they made him block. They loved the way he blocked in the slot, but we're talking $10-11 million for a blocking slot corner who's in his 30s, who had 20 catches. So either he'll come back at a severely reduced rate, or they'll let him go to save $10 or $11 million there. Then they'll probably go a lot of restructures after that. They'll do probably Watt, probably Highsmith, maybe Fitzpatrick. That could save them a whole ton of money. Then they have to make a decision on Hayward and which way they will go there. I would assume that they would just extend him. Don't give him any new money. Extend him for a year or two so you can get that $22 million cap hit and spread it out over 2 or 3 years, which means you'd have to eat some of it later on in the old down the road a little bit. But that $22 million is pretty significant. There's a guy like Larry Ogunjobi. I mean, he's making a ton of money and really hasn't performed up to that level. But you look at the depth of that defensive line, and you might have to bite the bullet, man. You might have to say, I got to pay him. I think he's owed like 12 or 13 on the cap. But when you look at the depth there, it's just not good. And you probably try to hold on to him as much as you can. Now, if you could go to free agency and pretty much sure, I think he has some sort of a bonus kicking in a couple days after free agency. So they could be able to get somebody, then they would probably move on from him then. But I really wouldn't anticipate that. But I think they'll have plenty of money to be able to go and find a couple players they want, on the free agent market.
You're watching the Black and Gold Three Rivers podcast for February 21st. Mark Kaboly from The Athletic. He's the Steeler insider over there joining us about the Steelers offseason, which is just really just a week underway, but going to be an exciting few months. Always is here in the city of Pittsburgh when you're talking about the Steelers. We're talking about cuts made last week. Mark, the two obvious offseason questions out there was Mike Tomlin getting extended and then the quarterback situation. We know the answer to number one. They came out pretty early and said an extension will be done here relatively sooner rather than later. Here in the spring. Of course, the offensive coordinator was another hot topic, but the quarterback room seems to be the biggest obvious thing right now, right? You got Kenny Pickett coming into year 3, still question marks in and around that. Trubisky's now gone. Of course, Mason Rudolph is the other hot topic right now. Where do you see this quarterback room currently, and where you think it's going to be heading here in the offseason?
Well, I think Pickett pretty much is been crowned the number one heading into the offseason here, regardless of who comes back, regardless if Rudolph comes back, regardless if they go find somebody like Ryan Tannehill or somebody of that ilk to come in and be a backup. I think they want to give Kenny that one last chance. And, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, we're talking about a guy that really, you use a 20th overall pick. You want to give him all the opportunities necessary here. I know he struggled last year, but last year at this time, though, at this point, he was considered the second coming, right? He was the future of this team. Even through the offseason, through the preseason, this guy was a stud. Then he struggled, got hurt, offensive coordinator issues, and we all know the story here. But he's still pretty cheap on the salary. But this is his last opportunity because next year at this time, they would have to make a decision on a 5th-year option, which is a crazy amount of money. So it makes a lot of sense. As for Mason, it all depends. First of all, the Steelers have to make him an offer where a twofold offer. They got to make him an offer where he gets paid a decent amount of money. And we're talking about 2 for 10, 2 for 12, nothing to break the bank with, a little bit more than Mitch was getting. And they have to assure that he has an opportunity to actually fight for this job. That's something that he did not get last year. It's something he didn't get 2 years ago as well, even though he was told. So, I mean, it all depends on the market. If the Steelers really wanted him, they're going to go to him now within the next week or two and give him a fair offer. And I think he would take it and come back. Because once you get to the free agency market, you don't know who's really wants you, if anybody. I mean, is it a better fit for Mason Rudolph to take $1 million more and go to Denver and be cut, be cut in 6 months or sit the bench? I mean, it will be better for him to go, I don't know, back up in New York or something. I don't know. I don't think so. He wants to come back, but they got to give him the opportunity with the money and the chance. And it might just be his best chance here. I mean, let's face it. Mike Tomlin pulled the plug on Kenny Pickett the last month of the season, or at least the last 2 or 3 games when he was healthy. Why wouldn't he do it again? So at least Rudolph would probably feel a little bit good about that point, where it's not like Kenny can do nothing wrong to get yanked. It was proven last year that he can do something wrong and he would get yanked and they would move on. So we'll find this out within, what are we talking about, next week or so, I would say. If you're in 2 weeks, maybe. I mean, definitely before that March 13th new league year, you'll probably have a good indication whether or not Rudolph's coming back or not.
Wow. Yeah, and Rudolph got, no looks last year in free agency when he tested the market.
Nothing great. I mean, he got some looks, but he knew if he went somewhere else, he could get whacked in a hurry and make no money. He knew if he was coming to the Steelers, they keep 3 quarterbacks, he had $1 million guaranteed. So he was thinking about the old pocketbook there a little bit yet last year. So it's a little different situation this year, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. How about the free agency part of this with the quarterback position? Lloyd, lots of talk about Kirk Cousins. You mentioned Ryan Tannehill, which would make sense with Arthur Smith coming in. But how about Justin Fields? He seems to be the hot topic right now in Chicago. I saw something online last night that he quit following the Bears on his Instagram account or Twitter or something, which is always an indication, right, that it's crazy. The writing's in stone.
George Pickens does it. Deontay Johnson does it. Everybody. Yeah. Didn't Kyler Murray do that a couple of years ago too?
Yep.
Funny thing is, all those teams remain with the teams that they unfollowed.
Imagine that. I'm
going to start unfollowing you, Ed. I don't know. Maybe.
There you go.
Maybe that will say something there. But Fields is it's tough, just for the fact that he's in his 4th year. If you make a trade for him, they're going to want decent return. First rounder or second and a fifth, something like that. Then if you're Steelers, you have to then immediately pick up his 5th-year option. If not, it's just a waste of money. And that 5th-year option is like $23 million. Wow. So you're guaranteeing him $3 million this year, $22-23 next year, a potential 1st and 5th round pick for a guy that the Bears does not want and who hasn't really proven anything. That's a lot of money, it's a lot of risk involved right there for a guy that hasn't really proved a lot right now. Plus, I mean, if you do that, you might as well just kick Kenny to the side, right? He's done. Because if you're coming in, Justin Fields, he's your starter this year, he's your starter next year. At that point, you might as well just get rid of Kenny Pickett. And they're not going to do that. So it just doesn't make sense. Would I love to have him? Sure, you'd love to have as much talent as possible, but there's a business side to it as well where it just doesn't line up where it would make sense whatsoever. So I just find it impossible that they would make this move at all. I mean, even with some of the other guys, the Kirk Cousins, he's going to want $40 million. Who's going to give a 36-year-old with coming off of Achilles $36 million guaranteed money? Crazy. At least the Steelers wouldn't. And you look at who else? Russell Wilson. I wouldn't want Russell Wilson. There ain't no way I want Russell Wilson in here. So I think unless you go with a Tannehill and you line up the old dots of the Arthur Smith, but that's still a 35-year-old that hasn't been successful in 5 years either as well. So I think their best bet is to make Mason Rudolph an offer that he cannot refuse. That's the way I think they should go about it. Who knows if they will.
And then to have an open battle in training camp, right? Between Kenny and Mason.
Open, right? At that point, it's still not going to be an open battle. I mean, they'll frame it that way. Is it Kenny's job until he loses it again? I think, and once he loses it again, it's over. I think the leash would be smaller or shorter, and they would give him a half a season, then yank him at that point. Then you'd go forward with Rudolph at that point. But I think they have every inkling or every desire to give Kenny a legitimate one final shot, sort of like how they gave Matt Canada one final shot last year. And how'd that work out?
or how Bruce Arians never retired, right? He wasn't let go.
He retired, then all of a sudden he was coach of the year like a year later.
Imagine that. Imagine that. Hey, let's talk free agency as far as what the Steelers currently have, what they'd be looking to re-sign. Mark, I want to get your opinion on these guys. I pulled some names this morning. A few names actually kind of surprised me. I didn't realize their contracts were up. Of course, Mason Rudolph, of course, we already talked about. Montavious Adams, Kaylon Alexander. You got Marcus Golden, who gave good depth at the linebacker position. But Miles Killebrew is a free agent out there. That's an interesting one. James Pierre and Levi Wallace, who, of course, was the big free agent sign from Buffalo a couple years ago. Any of those names, obviously Killebrew is probably the top name that kind of jumps out at you. But any other ones that you think are must re-signs for him, and will they get them done?
I don't think any are must, to be honest with you, out of them all. You would love to have Killebrew back, and he'd be crazy not to come back. He'd probably get a decent raise. I don't know, $3-4 million a year for a guy that just plays special teams. No, he does it at the highest level, yeah. But Levi Wallace, you could probably wait on him, right? See what happens in the draft. See what happens in free agency. All the other ones are just, wait and see.
Right.
Come to me in May or June if I have an open spot, and we'll sign you right there. The interesting ones are guys like who are heading into their final year, like the Freiermuth and the James Daniels. Now, they wouldn't quite necessarily sign them right now, but they would wait till probably August. Those are the guys you have to make decisions on, because once you get into the regular season, they don't negotiate contracts anymore. That's their own self-imposed rule, which then means those two would be going to free agency next year. And I don't know if you want, once again, James Daniel, who's played well at right guard, and he's still 26, I think 27. He's very young. And Freiermuth, who shouldn't really command a ton of money on the free agency market because he really hasn't put up a ton of stats in his 3 years. So I would look at those two more than I would look at any of the free agents. It's a really lame free agency class.
It's light this year, right?
Yeah. Now next year is going to be huge or significant, but I think they set it up that way. So they thought they were going to have a 2-year run at this, and
they'll pick up Najee Harris's option, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt. That's only $6.7 million, I think. That's guaranteed money now come next year, but they have to do that by like May 2nd. That seems like a no-brainer right there as well. So that's another move that they have to make as well. I mean, it's nice to have him and Jaylen Warren. Jaylen Warren, I think, is the next restricted free agent maybe. Or I don't know if he's restricted or not. All that means is he's coming back. So not much in the way of keeping their own people, which it's just a matter of they have to fill some holes.
I was pleasantly surprised when I pulled that list earlier this morning because, as you said, normally every year there's at least a couple big names on there that you're like, man, this is a guy they should re-sign, but he's going to test the market. He's going to get offered a lot of money. That's just not the Steelers' way, and he's going to leave. But I agree with you, Mark. Looking at those names, it's just a lot of more depth than anything. Killebrew is the main one that jumps out at you as the big special teamers. Any targets as far as positions go, you think in free agency that the Steelers will go after? Inside linebacker, a center. I thought Mason Cole, man, those low snaps, especially late in the season, killed some of those drives. Drove me nuts. You're a football guy. I'm a football guy. We were a lineman. Man, when you get those low snaps, it just drove me nuts.
Yeah. He's in his final year of his deal as well. Cole, I think they would be okay with him for another season. Sure, they'd like to upgrade it. They can upgrade it in the draft. But that's what makes it difficult, because you got free agency, then you have the draft. And if you add somebody in free agency, then draft somebody, it doesn't seem like it's in the right order. I mean, just prime example was Trubisky 2 years ago. They signed him because they had to have a quarterback following Roethlisberger, not knowing they were going to get Kenny. And then Trubisky ends up getting screwed here. So a lot depends on what they draft as well. But, I mean, the positions are what they are. I mean, defensive line, they need some talent and depth. Cornerback, they need some talent and depth. And inside linebacker, they were able to go find a couple last year, right? I mean, Quan Alexander wasn't assigned until July.
The training camp, yep.
Landon Roberts was an earlier signing, but he turned out to be pretty doggone good. And Cole Holcomb was another free agency signing. So, I mean, Alexander, I don't know. He's a free agent. You have to wait and see with him. Holcomb might not be back until October. I mean, that leg injury was awful. So it's definitely a place of need. But I think, if anything, they'd probably address that position in free agency because it shouldn't be that expensive. But I would go find myself a defensive lineman if I could. I mean, if you really want to like hit one out of the ballpark, I mean, Christian Wilkins of Miami. I mean, he might get 17, 18 a year, but guess what? Ogunjobi's getting 13. So what's really the difference, right?
Right.
I would go defensive line. They really need to upgrade and get younger on the defensive line. But those guys are typically expensive. I mean, there's Chase Young out there as well. I mean, I wouldn't put anything past Omar Khan. Who thought they were going to go get Sam Waller last year? That was a shock to everybody, in my opinion. He turned out to be a pretty doggone good signing at left guard. So they got something in mind. I mean, obviously they need a corner next side Joey Porter. But if you go out and look for a Bears Jalen Johnson, which they were tied to a little bit at the trade deadline last year, if he doesn't get franchised, that's a ton of money, man. That's a ton of money for a guy.
Right.
You almost like to draft guys on the cornerback side because then you obviously can develop them and don't have to pay them a ton of money, obviously, early on. So as for center, to me, if they get one in the first round or they get one in the second round, great. But I think you can deal with Mason Cole for one more year.
That's a good segue to the draft coming up, Mark. The Steelers with the 20th overall pick in the first round. They got 7 total picks, 2 in the 4th round, no 5th round draft pick this upcoming season. But, where do you think they go in this draft? And again, not to go back to the quarterback subject, but if, this is a heavy draft for quarterbacks, unlike a few years ago when they got Pickett, when there wasn't much. Do they try to go after a quarterback at some point in this draft if it's sitting there? But overall, who do you like? What position, at least in that first round?
I mean, you got to love the tackle position. I would love to get another tackle next to Broderick Jones here. And that tackle, I mean, you could go 8 to 10 deep in the first round. So there should be at least a couple of guys there at 20 for them to be able to take. Jackson Powers Johnson, is that his name? From Oregon, the center, monster guy.
Big guy, yep.
He would be great, but he might be gone. You're just going to have to play the draft a little bit right there. I mean, there's a couple cornerbacks out there. Cooper DeJean from Iowa, he can play a little bit of everything, corner, safety, return kicks. So I just more look at positions more than I look at players right there. If you know anything about the Steelers, they do want to build out their trenches more than anything. That's the, not only the old Steelers way, the new Steelers way, and the way Andy Weidel, the GM, assistant GM, wants to go about it as well because they did it in Philly. So
it worked out okay there when they were there.
Yeah, I mean, at one point, I think they had 5 Pro Bowl offensive linemen like a couple years ago. So I would love to see a tackle. I would love to see another right tackle or a left tackle, wherever. It doesn't really matter. And have 2 bookends for the next, 5 to 10 years there. But it all depends on how that draft goes right now, how it breaks. I don't know if there's a ton of defensive linemen there early, but you have to take a lineman. I think wide receivers in play, but probably not in the first round. I would say second day there. I mean, you're going to need wide receivers as well. So, one thing about this new front office is they were pretty doggone good in the draft last year. And
very good.
That's how you build up your team in a hurry. You fill positions or needs in the draft, then you supplement it with some cash and some free agency, and that's how you win. That's how they won for a long time here in the city. They wanted to get back to that.
It seemed like those drafts in the late 2010 to 2020 era kind of caught up with them in recent years. A lot of misses more than hits, but I tend to agree with you. Last year's draft class, at least 1 year in, looks outstanding so far for Omar Khan in his first go at it. Hey, real quick, is Le'Veon Bell coming back?
Let's hope not. I mean, I don't know. Let me think here. A 32-year-old running back that hasn't played in like 3 or 4 years, who, when he last played, was benched or never could get on with Kansas City, and when he played for the Jets, stunk. And you already got two running backs, Jalen Warren and Najee Harris. Sign me up. Absolutely not.
Oh, you got to love the chatter out there. Hey, Mark, we appreciate you coming on and join us. I know you got to go here in a few minutes. You got other stuff to do here today in and about the city. But hey, we're both Bell Vernon guys, back-to-back state champs for our Leopards, which is kind of exciting for our neck of the woods where we grew up. And that was a lot of fun. But I was talking to we have a mutual friend, John Sandusky, good buddy of ours both.
Oh, Sandusky. We actually played on the same, am I allowed to say, midget league team?
Linwood Eagles.
Linwood Eagles back in the mid 80s.
Now, John, I want you to clear the air today with John. John says,
I know it's coming, but go ahead.
He said that you still claim to this day that he ended your football career.
I believe, for the past 30 years, I tore up my knee in high school, and it was in training camp, and I was on the boards, blocking, and my knee just blew up. And for 30 years, I thought it was John Sandusky, and I talked to him maybe like a year ago. He goes, "That wasn't me. That was Matt Dorenzo." I'm like, "What?" So I've been living a lie for 30 years now, thinking it's Sandusky.
You've been blaming John.
I still think it was him. I think he's lying.
He wanted me to clear the air with you today and said it was not him that ended your football career back then.
I mean, he said that. I'm like, "Are you sure about this?" For 30 years, I absolutely convinced myself it was Sandusky that ended my career. Not only my football career, like my entire athletic career. Yeah. And 40 years later or 30 years later, I still can't walk up the steps. So it's all your fault, Sandusky.
He says you guys played one of the biggest offensive lines back then. He mentioned some names, Jimmy Johnson, Joe Rudolph. We know Joe Rudolph.
Joe Rudolph once hit me so hard in training camp that my head was bloody.
Man, oh man. That's saying something there. That's saying something.
You know what Sandusky forgot to tell you? How I used to take him yard when he played for Bell Vernon and I played for like Ross Draver and Pony League Baseball. He doesn't bring that up, does he?
There you go. Cedar Creek Park, maybe?
This is when we played we're at the old North Bell Vernon Park, we're right behind the Dairy Queen.
Which they just re-renovated, by the way. They've redone all that out there.
That used to be an actual Pony League baseball field.
Wow.
And until they made it a park. And yeah, Sandusky, we played high school ball together. And here's a good thing about Sandusky was this. I played first base in a pitch, and every time he threw a fastball, his hat would fall off. And every time he threw a curveball, his hat would just like turn to the side. So I knew every pitch he would throw by the way the hat, his head was so big that he couldn't snap the snap back on it, so it was just sitting on his head. He knows what I'm talking about.
We definitely believe it, and we're talking about John Sandusky too. So just to clarify, which Sandusky we're referring to that you played football with back in the day.
Yeah, his boys like pumping in 18, 20 points a game for I forget what's the name of the school, St. Louis. Yeah, St. Louis, and what is that, Peters Township, Upper St. Clair, or whatever. I saw him play the other day, and really reminded me of his dad. He got a little fiery attitude there.
Yeah, he's a very, very good basketball and baseball player as well for John. Hey, Mark, appreciate you coming on the program here this morning and joining us to talk Steelers offseason. We'd love to have you on again, maybe closer to the draft and talk more offseason stuff if you have the time available.
All right, Ed, take it easy, buddy, and let's go Leps, right?
Absolutely, all the time, man. Us Bell Vernon, Mon Valley guys, we got to stick together, that's for sure. So, Mark Kaboly from The Athletic. You can catch all of his great Steeler coverage on The Athletic and across all the social media outlets here. And Mark, enjoy the offseason, brother. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, we'll see you, Ed.
All right, Mark Kaboly from The Athletic joining us here on the Black and Gold Three Rivers podcast show. We will be on later today with Brian as we talk more Pittsburgh social media type stuff. sports and other things here on the website as well. We want to thank you for joining us here this morning, and we'll see you soon.